Good morning. So this is our very first emergency live stream discussion. So there are two topics on the agenda. The first topic, of course, is the World Cup, which just concluded a couple of hours ago with Spain winning 1-0. The second topic, of course, is the Iran war, which everyone is expecting to escalate. So the tempo, the ferocity of the war, it is much faster. It's much more greater than in March. What is happening right now that is really interesting is the Americans are reporting, publicizing the deaths of soldiers, American casualties in the Middle East. This is something that they refrained from doing in March. They said that only 13 died throughout those 6 weeks. And of course, that was a very suspicious number. And now we've only been a few days into this war, but they are already reporting 3 deaths, as well as possibly dozens of casualties because due to Iranian strikes on American bases throughout the Middle East, primarily Jordan. Okay, so these are the two topics that we will discuss. This is the first of our um, emergency live streams. So I hope that this is as interactive as possible. So I'll be monitoring chat throughout. So I prepared a brief presentation on the World Cup. As I mentioned in my live stream a couple days ago, I thought that there's a lot of evidence that suggests that Argentina would win it. I felt as though it was being rigged in favor of Argentina. But at the same time, I felt that Spain was the much stronger team. And I also think that my intuition told me that Spain would win. And it turns out that Spain did win. And so this is really interesting. So there are different possibilities for this. The first possibility, of course, is that I'm just paranoid. Everyone's just paranoid. And this at all is not rigged. And the world is not as deterministic as we once believed. Okay. So the first explanation is that I'm just completely wrong. And my entire worldview, framework for understanding the world, it's just completely off base. And that is a very strong possibility, okay? So that's theory number one. Theory number two is they rigged it to a point, which is they wanted 4 teams in the semifinals because these 4 teams would draw the most revenue for FIFA. They, of course, are Spain, France, England, and Argentina. And that's what they got. What they got, and in the finals, what actually happened, they didn't really care. And the third possibility is that they did rig it, but there's a problem with all this, which is that Argentina became too arrogant. They suffer from hubris, and so they just underperform, right? So Argentina, and this is an amazing statistic, but Argentina is the first team in the World Cup not to have a shot on goal in the first 90 minutes. In fact, I think they got their first shot on goal at the 120-minute mark. So that's incredible to think about. Basically, Spain just outplayed Argentina throughout. And in Spain, because they had to face Portugal and France to get to the finals, they were well prepared. They were extremely enthusiastic and they were determined to win. Whereas Argentina, because they were basically given a very easy path to the semifinals, the first tough team that they faced was England in the semifinals. They basically became lazy and complacent and didn't really perform to the best of the ability. Okay, so those are the three possibilities. I'm not saying which possibility is correct. I'm just saying that these are all three different possibilities that we should consider. So again, what I do is I try to develop predictive models, predictive modeling for the world. So it's always important to sort of step back and ask ourselves, what is our framework, what are our assumptions, and what are our predictions, and trying to analyze in real time how our predictions are turning out. To be fair to myself, I never said that Argentina would win. What I did say in the previous live stream was that if Argentina did win, and if it was clear that the officials were rigging the game in favor of Argentina, and if Messi were to score the winning goal, then I would predict that Messi would become president of Argentina in 5 to 10 years' time, and that Argentina would become a major hub of transnational capital. Okay, so that's what I said during my live stream. Just to be completely clear, because some of you are saying that I predicted that Argentina would win. I did not predict Argentina would win. I said that logically, I think that Argentina would win, but intuitively, I believe that Spain would win. Okay. Um, so let me do a quick presentation and then I will open the floor to um, questions and discussions. Okay. So let me share my screen really quickly. Okay. So this is my presentation on the World Cup. First of all, I want to thank Alfred, who sent me a very long email pointing out the problems with my analysis. And he's absolutely right in that I was making a lot of factual mistakes in my analysis. The first thing that's really important is to appreciate that there are quite a few high-profile um, uh, world football stars who do represent Israeli companies. For example, Cristiano Ronaldo does represent an Israeli company. Also, second thing that we need to keep in mind is that when Messi went to Israel, he did so as part of FC Barcelona's 2013 History Tour, meaning that he visited both Israel as well as Palestine. So that's something that's really important for us to remember. And the last comment is that a lot of people in the comments say that the FIFA World Cup is rigged in favor of certain teams, and there's very little evidence that is the case. You can make arguments back and forth because there's a lot of information that supports both sides. Okay, so this is a very good email, and I want to thank Alfred for taking the time to write this. I also this email also made me think a lot about my methodology, and I can be very extreme at times. Sometimes I prefer the soundbite. Sometimes I want to make this bold statement that goes viral. And this email reminds me that right now I'm pretty influential. A lot of people pay attention to what I'm doing. I need to be more nuanced, more balanced, more scholarly in my approach. So again, I want to thank Alfred for this email, and I will try my very best to be more nuanced, more subtle, more balanced in my approach. Because ultimately, I see myself more as an educator rather than as a social media influencer. I'm here to help people develop their own analytical models. I'm here to help people develop their own critical thinking skills. And that's what I want to do for the next 50 years. I see myself as a teacher of the world. I feel extremely privileged to be in this position, but I also appreciate that with this position, with this privilege comes a lot of responsibilities. And so I apologize if I was misleading people in the past. So thank you again, Alfred, for this email. That said, I want to go over some things I found interesting about the lead up to the finals. So the first thing I'll point out is like if you look at Polymarket, Polymarket had Spain at winning about 59% to 40, Argentina at 41%. That's a pretty, I mean, that's a very strong bias towards Spain. And I think it's an acknowledgement that Spain is just a far superior team to Argentina on a variety of metrics. In fact, you have Ronaldo, the football legend, who basically said that Spain will beat Argentina easily because Spain will have ball control, and he's absolutely right. I mean, he did say that Spain will have the ball the entire time. They have excellent ball control. They work well together as a team. So he's absolutely right, and this is exactly what happened during the World Cup, and that's why Spain won 1-0 at the end of the day. That said, a lot of people will point out some problems in the lead up to the World Cup, and I found these things funny. Okay, so we know the result. We know that Argentina didn't win, but there are some funny things that was happening in the lead up to the World Cup. The first thing is the referee who will be in charge of the World Cup final. He did have an altercation with the law 6 years ago. He was found in a brothel with cocaine, guns, and 20,000 euros. And there's actually a news report from Slovenia about this. This is on Yahoo Sports, but it was translated from a news outlet in Slovenia. But this has happened in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and police conducted a raid against prostitution, and they found this referee in the cabin, and he ran away. He tried to flee on a boat, and they arrested him. But after a few hours of interrogating him, they found he had no direct connection to criminal organization. Okay, so this is a really funny thing that the internet digged up about this referee. Um, as you can imagine, there was a lot of superstition, a lot of divination in the lead up to the World Cup. This is an Argentina popular show, and there they brought in a fortune teller to predict that Argentina would win the World Cup. Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, did not actually go to the game because he believed that him going to the game would jinx the team, and so he stayed at home and did all the proper rituals to ensure that Argentina would win the game. You have two major celebrities, Conor McGregor as well as Drake, betting in favor of Argentina. Drake himself bet $1.5 million on Argentina to win the World Cup final. This is nothing to him, right? This is like nothing to this guy. But it shows that they are very supportive of Argentina. You have Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with Argentina's ambassador to Israel, a man named Rabbi Shimon Wasnis, and Netanyahu expressed the greatest support for Argentina. And the reason why is, well, first of all, Argentina and Israel have become very close these past 2 years. Um, and the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, is actually part of the Chabad Hasid movement. In fact, what's really interesting is that Javier Milei's visit, first foreign visit as head of state was to the grave of Rebbe Sneerson in Queens, New York. Um, that grave, by the way, and this is really interesting, is the most visited Jewish holy site outside of Israel. So there's a very strong connection between Israel and Javier Milei. Another interesting thing is that after Argentina defeated England in the semifinals 2-1, they unfurled a banner saying basically the Malvinas. The Malvinas is Argentina's name for the Falklands, belongs to Argentina. And this is clearly a violation of FIFA's ban on political statements during sporting matches.
Listo,
And
Daniel.
and the
Yeah,
White
super.
the White House, the White House, the White House came up with a statement saying, "Well, Argentina has a right to free speech." That is true, but FIFA rules are pretty clear about this. You are not allowed to discuss politics in sporting matches. So this is clearly a violation. Um, and I think this Falklands issue will become a major issue in Argentina for next year. Now that the World Cup is is over. Some of you, if you're here, could you please unmute? Could you please mute yourselves? While I'm talking, it's important that you mute yourself. After I finish discussing, I'll leave the room. I'll open the floor to discussion. So if you want to have a question, please raise your hand, okay? And I will unmute you. Okay. So again, Javier Milei says himself the Malvinas were, are, and will always be Argentine. So this shows us that within the next year, the Falklands will become a major geopolitical issue. And this is interesting because right now the UK controls the Falklands, but the UK is really far away. And there's something called the Monroe Doctrine, which is the Americans claim sovereignty over the entire Western Hemisphere. So I would not be surprised if Argentina, in order to stir up national sentiment, they were to make a claim for the Falklands, and the Americans would support this claim. And there's really nothing that England could do about this, right? Right now, Trump is trying to dislodge England from the Western Hemisphere. That basically means two places. No, actually three places. It means the Falklands, it means the Caribbean, and it means Canada. All right. So basically, Trump is just trying to claim imperial control over the entire Western Hemisphere, and Argentina will be his proxy in order to do this. That is my guess. Um, right now, though, there's a major problem for Israel in Argentina, which is no one actually likes them in Argentina. So as you can see from this poll, right now in Argentina, um, you have a vast majority of people who don't like Israel. 55% of people in Argentina have a unfavorable view towards Israel. You have 21% who have a favorable view. And this is consistent throughout the world. There are only four countries in the world where actually Israel has a net favorable rating, and those are India. India is the largest country, and India it's 28% who oppose Israel, 32% who support Israel. The other three countries are, and this is like really funny, but they're in Africa. They are Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. Okay, these are the only four countries in the world where Israel has a net favorability rating among the population. The elite are a different issue, but among the population, um, Israel is extremely unpopular. So, how do you fix this issue? Well, I think that if you're Argentina, the easiest way to fix this issue is twofold, right? There are two things you can do. First is you stir up a conflict with England or the Falklands, and then Israel comes in and supports your claim towards the Falklands. I guarantee you, if Israel were to do this, then the popular opinion in Argentina would shift radically towards Israel. The Falklands is a huge nationalistic issue in Argentina. We know because why else would the Argentinian team unfurl the banner after the semifinals against England? So, this is a war that happened in 1982. It took 10 weeks. And Argentina doesn't fight that many wars. So I think there's a lot of anger, a lot of resentment towards England. So if Israel and the United States were to help Argentina reclaim the Falklands, then the Argentinians would be very, very happy. Also, I don't think there's anything in the Falklands worth preserving, right? I mean, I don't even know why England fought this war for the Falklands. If England gives up the Falklands, it doesn't really matter that much, considering all the problems that England is facing right now back at home. I mean, there's about a civil war that will emerge possibly in in England. So that's the first thing that can happen that would change the public opinion of Argentinians. Second thing that could happen is, and I think this will happen, is that Messi becomes president, right? Because Messi is like God in Argentina. And if Messi were to become president, he'd be the perfect puppet. The Argentinians would just go along with whatever Messi wants, and maybe Javier Milei or some other people would be behind the scenes pulling the strings. Okay, so I think these are my two predictions for Argentina, given the situation in that country. The first is like Falklands will become a major issue in the next year, and I think that Argentina will be able to reclaim Argentina with Israel and the United States supporting them. The second prediction is that Messi will become president of the United States in the next 10 years. Okay. So that is it from my end on Argentina. So are there any comments or questions um, about this presentation before I move on to Iran? Iran will actually be the bulk of our discussion, I assume, but um, um, does anyone? Okay, Kitty here has a question. So Kitty, just to warn you, this will be on YouTube. So if you're not comfortable having your face in public, just don't show the screen. Okay, I can hear you fine. So Kitty, can you please ask your question?
Thank you so much, Professor. I was wondering, now that you're making these predictions and you have a decent following, people are paying attention. Have you thought about the impact of making predictions? Do you think making predictions is going to change the outcomes nowadays, at some point?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question, and you're absolutely right in that. In theory, me making these predictions should influence the outcome. Um, but my intuition tells me that's not the case. Okay, so I want to use an analogy. So before I used to play a lot of Texas Hold'em poker, and in Texas Hold'em poker, right, most people are observers. Usually, if there's 10 people on a table, there's only two people in a hand, and sometimes the hands get really, really intense. And it could go on for half an hour because it's the river card, and a major bet has been made, and one of the players is forced to think very deeply whether to call or to fold, and that person, when making the decision, will never take into account what the other people think. Usually, the other people on the table, they are more objective observers, right? So they can possibly make better decisions than people in the hand. They have access to they're neutral, so they can observe how both are playing the game. But never in my life have I been in an instance where the actions, the talking of spectators influenced the decision making of the people in the hand. Um, in 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 fact, I think people in the hand they tend to like block things out. So I would say, yeah, in theory, if I'm making these predictions, then maybe the players in the game will take these predictions into account. But in my observation of people, when they do things, they don't really care what the observers think and want. They're just focused on the game itself. So, does it make sense, Kitty? Do you want to respond to that, or do you want to ask a follow-up question?
I understand your analogy. I was thinking that if the world population is more and more aware of what is happening, maybe at some point it will have an impact on the decision makers, and they might want to play their game differently. But that is something we will see going forward. I do have a follow-up question, but it is not this related to this first question. The follow-up question is more about, do you think that the transnational capital you mentioned, flowing from the old Western Europe bloc to the North American bloc, it seems these days, do you think that there's going to be contention between Europe and North America because United States is more powerful now and they're kind of working with Israel in a way, but it's probably not easy for the European bloc to be spectators. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that people prioritize the nation state. People think that the nation state is a constituent player in this world game that we have. And I don't know how true that is. I think transnational capital is beyond the nation state. It controls the nation state. It basically warps geopolitics to its advantage. And quite honestly, I think that Western Europe is a vassal state to the United States. This has been true after World War II. It's true especially now in that the United States is forcing Ukraine to fight this war in Ukraine, which does not all benefit Europe. So I agree with you that a lot of transnational capital it's flowing from Europe outwards because, quite honestly, Europe is hopeless. But this is not going to create tension between Europe and the United States because Europe is essentially a colony of the U United States. I know there's been a lot of anger over Trump's tariffs against Europe. I know there's been a lot of anger about Greenland and possibly about Canada in the future and possibly even over the Falklands as this year progresses. But you have to look at exactly what the Europeans have done in response. Okay, you have a lot of rhetoric, you have a lot of theater, but like what have the Europeans done? Well, they've done exactly what the Americans asked them to do, which is basically up this war in Ukraine, increase NATO defense spending, and prepare the population for conscription. So I don't see at any point how Europe diverges from the United States. If Europe and the United States were really in conflict, you would imagine the United States were, you can imagine that Europe, their best strategy would become closer with Russia and China, right? To basically come to a approach with both countries because Europe, how Germany became rich was they basically had access to cheap Russian energy and then they converted that into really expensive manufactured goods like BMWs and Mercedes and sold to China. And now what's Europe doing? Europe has a trade war with China and Europe has a real war with Russia. So I don't see how the United States and Europe are conflict with each other. Okay. Archer, did you have a question? And guys, I know there are a lot of questions, but could we just please stay on topic? I know a lot of you are interested in the Iran war, but we'll get to that in the next section, okay? Archer, could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Or make your
Yeah,
comment.
yeah. First of all, thanks for taking my question. I remember last time you were talking about like the possibility or like the concept or theory of Argentina kind of becoming a resource colony for like I think like Israel or America. I was just curious as to how that works. Like if there's no military operation, like does a resource colony work in terms of like trade deals or is there some sort of like IMF preferential treatment or like how does that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question, okay? So my theory about this is you're absolutely right in that, okay, well, in order for Argentina to become a resource colony, it needs to build a manufacturing capacity to be so. Right now, you have a population that's poor, but pretty complacent. They're pretty happy with the way things are. They don't want to exploit the environment. They don't want to go build factories. They're pretty happy with the way things are. And those who are unhappy, they just move out. It's like Canada, right? So the only solution to this problem is population replacement through immigration. Okay, that's a strategy. So right now you have, I think that you have lots of, well, I do know you have lots of IDF soldiers going to Argentina every year on a tourist visa to visit. Every year, there a billionaire. I forget his name. But he has a ranch in Argentina. He brings about 10,000 IDF soldiers for a summer retreat every year in for Argentina. you have Javier Milei signing trade deals with Israel. But the only way that Argentina can reach its full potential as a resource colony is if you bring in lots of immigrants. And who are the most ideal immigrants to bring in? Indians. Okay, so imagine a situation where Israel provides the muscle, the IDF basically, and you have Indians coming in as energy, as labor. And look, right now, India and Israel are like best friends. Modi and Netanyahu have become really close. And the logic of this is really simple. If you're India and you'll become the next China, you cannot use China's playbook, right? You cannot have American companies come in and build up your manufacturing capacity like they did in China in 1980s and 1990s. Because first of all, the Americans already did this and it didn't work out well for America. But also, India is a democracy, so it does not have the state capacity of China, where China can just politically will will this into being. It can basically create these political policies that shift the people from the countryside to the factories. China also has a really good logistics network. That really is the key to China's manufacturing success. Its logistics network, right? It's able to move people from the countryside to the cities. It's able to move supplies, move raw resources from all around the world to China, and then export manufactured goods all around the world. So India cannot be next China, right? At the same time, India has a major advantage over China in that China is aging, whereas India has a pretty young, vibrant population. So what you do is you basically move your population overseas, right? And this is already happening. You got millions of Indians flowing into Australia, into Canada, and every time that India signs a trade deal, it requires that nation to open up its borders to Indians. Okay, so recently Japan has signed a trade deal with India. I think part of this trade deal is that Japan also has to welcome Indians into Japan. Okay, so this is how India plans to get rich, by exporting its young labor overseas. And Argentina makes a lot of sense because Argentina is almost like virgin territory. You've got a pretty complacent population that don't really want to work, that don't want to exploit the environment. And so if you just marry Indian energy with Zionist capital, this would be an unbeatable combination. Okay, and that's the idea. That's a plan to force massive immigration to Argentina to create this resource colony. Does that make sense, Archer? Did you want to ask a follow-up question or make a comment?
No, that makes perfect sense to me. I never really thought about it that way before. I never really considered what the trade deals would look like. But that's a really interesting take, and I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Archer. That was a great question. Okay. HH, could you unmute yourself, please? HH.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, John. I'm from Australia and I love your videos. Thanks very much for what you do. So my question is like, when it comes to Argentina, like why Argentina of all countries? Like, what is the history of Argentina and like how did this goofy hair clown, Milei, how did he like become president? Like, he seems like as a goofy clown. Yeah, I don't really know much about Argentina. Can you please explain?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, great question. Okay. So, um, if I'm trying to venture capital, I'm basically a VC, right? I'm a venture capitalist. And I'm always looking for the best bang for my buck. I'm looking for the best investment opportunity. And there's certain criteria I need to meet to figure out if it's a good investment or not. Okay. First of all, I need to look at its potential, its growth potential. Can it scale? How wealthy can it become? So I don't invest in the United States because the United States is saturated with wealth. It's actually reached its potential a long time ago. I don't invest in China either because the population is aging, the economy is in decline, its geopolitical prospects are not that bright, right? Because China's an export economy, and if there's a war raging around the world, well, that economy collapses. Okay, so I don't look at where everyone's looking at. I look at potential growth possibilities. All right. So that's the first point, that criteria. Number one is potential growth possibility, right? So where are certain places in the world where there's tremendous growth possibility? Well, Argentina is one place, right? Because low population, lots of resources, really untapped environment. Okay, that's number one. Number two would be a place like Australia, where Australia has a pretty advanced industrial base, but it hasn't reached its full potential yet. Okay, so Australia is another possibility. Ukraine is another possibility, but there's a war in Ukraine, right? Canada is another possibility, but Canada is controlled by the United States. So if I just look at all these possibilities, I'm stuck with Argentina as the place with the best growth potential that is yet untapped. Okay, that's criteria number one. Criteria number two is I'm looking at security, right? So if I put my money in a place, I want it to be safe. And so I don't put it in Ukraine because the Russians can come and steal all my investment. Okay, and that's what's happening to BlackRock right now, right? BlackRock basically gave Ukraine a lot of loans, and Ukraine gave them resources as collateral. But if Russia wins this war, that all goes to nothing. Okay, so that's the second criteria. Security. Argentina is good because Argentina is surrounded by two oceans. It has no enemies. It has a rivalry in soccer with Brazil, but like not actually going to fight a war because both are very large countries, and they don't and they're resource rich. Okay, so they don't really need to fight a war over resources, and there are no hostile powers in the Western Hemisphere. America controls the Western Hemisphere, but America is far away, right? And for America to extend downwards to Argentina, that's a very long way. America, the United States, is focused on taking control over the entire North American continent, and that's actually enough for the United States. It doesn't need to go further, right? It plans to go down to Venezuela, but it doesn't want to deal with Brazil and Argentina, right? So in terms of security, yes, okay. That's number two. And number three is uh, my potential to co-opt the political system. That's very important to me because if I'm an investor, I need to rig the game to benefit me, right? I'm not going to go and deal with democracy. I'm not going to go and deal with these crazy monarchs, right? Argentina, it's a democracy, but it's a pretty corrupt democracy. So I'm pretty sure I can influence the political system. Argentina is basically a corrupt oligarchy, right? So I know that I can use my capital to co-opt the oligarchy and bend them to my wishes. Okay, so if you think about it, only Argentina will fit all three categories. One is growth potential, right? Untapped resources. That's number two is security. Number three is you can co-opt the political system. All right. So you do this three criteria for any other place, and you're like, well, it doesn't really fit, right? So let's go to Australia, where you are. Well, okay, sure, untapped market, lots of resources, fine. Um, that's fine. Security, yeah, it's surrounded by the seas, but at the same time, China, Japan are close by. But that's fine. The third issue, though, is problematic in that Australia's democracy. And do I really want to deal with the native population? They could be a headache. Australians are notorious for being hard to deal with, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, but the Argentine population, I think, would be much more complacent because ultimately, if I'm an investor, I want to promote mass immigration in order to fully realize the industrial potential of this place, right? So you can say, look, there are three major investment opportunities: Canada, Australia, and Argentina. I think Argentina makes the most sense from the viewpoint of transnational capital. Argentina is basically the most ripe for colonization, for conquest. Australia, Canada, they're still part of the Anglosphere. They're basically resource colonies of the city of London, so you have to deal with the city of London. Whereas Argentina, again, it's virgin territory. So that's why they're looking at Argentina. Does that make sense to you, HH, or do you want to ask a follow-up question?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good explanation, man. Yeah, I mean, we have the lowest positive perception of Israel on Earth. So yeah, well, I mean, we're Aussies, we're America's bitch, but again, like we're pretty self-standing, I guess. Yeah. So like, who is Milei? Who is Javier Milei? And is he like a was his career like engineered by transnational capital from the beginning, or the transnational capital just sort of like attached them to him because they saw a ripe puppet or product?
Yeah, so I don't know enough about Javier Milei to comment, but there is a trend of how these individuals who seem to have no political background, they emerge out of nowhere. So I think Javier Milei, he was an economist, and he was a TV pundit that was known for sort of like clownish behavior and sort of outrageous comments. And, he's a very fierce libertarian, and then somehow he suddenly um, became head of Argentina. But I think a lot of his appeal was the fact that he promised to be a revolutionary. He's basically like Donald Trump of Argentina. He promised to take a chainsaw, famously took a chainsaw and like just, cut apart the Argentine bureaucracy that was holding Argentina back. And the other thing about Javier Milei that's very important is that he's very close with Habad Lubavitch, okay? And I've talked about Habad Lubavitch before. If you look at Habad Lubavitch, it's really interesting how they're connected to Donald Trump. They're connected to Vladimir Putin. So they're connected to Donald Trump through his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The Kushner family are very heavy into Habad Lubavitch. And then you have Javier Milei, who is also associated with Habad Lubavitch. In fact, as I pointed out, Javier Milei's first visit as first foreign visit as head of state was to the grave of Rebbe Schneerson, who used to be the messiah of Habad Lubavitch. There are a lot of people within Habad Lubavitch who consider him to be the messiah. Okay, so I don't have enough evidence to suggest that this is all conspiracy, but it seems to me an alignment of interests where Javier Milei found himself in a very good position, and transnational capital saw him as a good investment because ultimately, at the end of the day, transnational capital has unlimited financing, right? So it costs them nothing to invest in a politician. And now that Javier Milei has won out, well, now the relationship is becoming much more concrete. I think the same situation will happen with Le Lionel Messi, right? Who's a football star, but maybe transnational capital sees potential in him, and so they invest in him. I mean, that's also what happened with Donald Trump, where in 1980s, not Donald Trump was the first original reality TV star. He was in the tabloids every single day, and then there were people who were like, this guy could potentially be president of the United States. It costs us nothing to become his friend. It costs us nothing to invest in his properties, right? So let's just do it. So again, these people think in terms of like venture capitalists, but instead of investing in companies, they invest in individuals who could have a bright political future. I think that was the case with Javier Milei. If you invest in these people, one of two of them, you could be a unicorn, okay? But essentially, regardless of where he came from, Javier Milei now is bought and controlled by transnational capital. He is doing exactly what Israel wants in Argentina. Okay. So, do you have any more follow-up questions, HH, before I move on?
No, 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 it's
Okay.
all good. Yeah, I just find it kind of funny how like he pride himself on like a libertarian, and then as soon as he gets power, he becomes Israel's bitch.
Basically. Yeah, but a lot of them are
Yeah,
like that. A lot of them like that. I mean,
yeah.
Zelensky came to power promising to end the war in Ukraine. He actually visited Donbass and told these Azov battalion militants, right? These are basically Nazis, to cut the crap out, and they basically told him to get lost, right? So, and then Zelensky now is the biggest proponent of this war in Ukraine. So, Hannah,
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
your hand raised. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, it's actually about AI though. So, but I just feel like I'm not gonna have a chance later to
Okay,
ask.
sure. Yeah, sure. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So yeah, you mentioned that there's like a planned orchestration to crash the stock market, including via the AI bubble. I was wondering like what clues or evidence you have of that, and also if you still think it'll happen 2026. So yeah, I agree that AI is not profitable, and I agree that the government will probably bail it out. But before that, I was wondering, um, yeah, why you think so that it'll be crashed, like
Yeah,
as a planned crash.
yeah, so there's a lot of signaling to suggest like they are planning on a crash. Again, my theory, and I could be wrong, is that these crashes are manufactured rather than natural. Because I live in China and we never had a financial collapse. And I found that really weird because if you look at the stock market, it's basically like a casino, right? The real estate, it's a bubble. And so it's a controlled demolition we have in China. So I find it weird that why is it in China things are controlled demolitions, like the real estate market, it's gone down, but it hasn't collapsed the way that you saw in 2008, right? Whereas in America, you have these like financial crises all the time, and I think it's because a lot of these crises are manufactured. So if they're manufactured, what they need to do is signal that a crisis is coming in order to basically cover their ass. Basically, the idea is plausible deniability, right? So like, all the signs were there that this was going to collapse and it was not manufactured, right? So certain signs that I'm seeing, like they're going to manufacture an AI collapse are one, you have people saying that a collapse is imminent, right? So Andrew Ross Sorkin, who is probably the most famous financial journalist in America right now. He runs DealBook for New York Times, the most influential financial journalist in America. And he wrote a book called 1929. And he's talking about how we are about to face a financial crisis. This is a guy who spends every day with the leading CEOs of America. And you only get into that position if you know exactly what they want you to do, right? So that's one clue. You also have a journalist named Ed Zitron, Zitron, and he's very good. I mean, like I've watched his analysis; it's very strong. What's interesting to me though is how he's being promoted in like major news outlets that are basically propagandists for the oligarchs, so Bloomberg, CNBC, and he is saying that the AI is a complete bubble. Okay, OpenAI cannot make money; it will never make money, and the collapse will happen very soon. Okay, so the first thing that you have is signaling. Okay, then you have really prestigious institutions like the Bank of International Settlements, the Central Bank of Central Banks, coming out with reports saying that because of this war in Iran, because of disruptions to the global supply chain, you will have the collapse of the AI bubble. That I think is a very, very strong signal. And number three is you have people like Sam Altman who are openly discussing that the American government should take a stake in OpenAI. And so you have these three things happening. I think what's happening is they want to collapse the AI market. And the reason why they want to collapse the AI market is to basically to consolidate the winnings, right? So you've got a lot of people investing in AI, and a lot of these are retail investors. Once you collapse the market, then you can consolidate your winnings. Basically, transfer the money from the retail investors to the institutional investors. That's the first thing. Second thing you can do is you can engineer a government bailout. So now you have almost unlimited financing for your database rollout. Also, the major issue with the databases now is local opposition. But if it's being run by the government, then you have things like eminent domain come into play, and you can now quash opposition. Also, these data centers consume a lot of water as well as electricity, right? So you need government support, government subsidies in order to maintain these data centers. And the third thing is to basically consolidate the market, right? So you've got too many players, you consolidate the market. And by the way, this is exactly what happened in the dot-com crash and in the subprime crash as well. After this after the dot-com bubble burst, you had a few players emerge as the dominant players and we became essentially monopolies, such as Amazon and Google. And then these oligarchs were able to consolidate the winnings, right? So these stock market collapses, they're often manufactured and they're often about ensuring that the oligarchs are able to consolidate their winnings. Okay. Does that make sense, Hannah? Or
Yeah, I was wondering what incentive people like Sorkin would have to tell us about this, and I guess he could profit from the crash because he would have had sold before, right? And then he tells us it's gonna crash, and he's hoping for the crash, and then to rebuy it. So is that also what you mean that the day who wants to collapse it would be people like him then?
right. So Andrew Ross Sorkin is different. Ross Sorkin, he's a journalist, so he's basically a running dog of the oligarchs. What he wants is access to power, right? The oligarchs want to consult their winnings, but Andrew Ross Sorkin, he just wants access. He wants to be associated with the elite. And as long as he does what the elite want him to do, then they'll take him out to dinner. They'll invite him to Davos. They'll be his best friend, right? Does that make sense? So journalists are looking for
Yeah,
access.
I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
Yeah. And the oligarchs probably already sold and they want the crash, right? Basically, and they're hoping that's why they're telling people like these journalists then, I guess.
Yeah, but
They're giving this
also
access.
but also the real way to make your money is you short the market, right? So you are imagining
Yeah.
the market's going to go down to a certain number, and that's how you profit. Now, this is what happened during the subprime crisis when the bubble burst because institutional investors such as John Paulson, he took out huge bets that the market would collapse, right? So he made $20 billion off that crash that took away homes of millions of people. John Paulson made $20 billion betting against the subprime market. Okay, and I imagine the same thing will happen here when you have some institutional investors take out huge bets against the AI, and they'll make a lot of money that way.
Okay, and just last part. So do you think that it'll probably happen like by end of 2026, or when do you think the latest this could happen? Any thoughts on that?
I can't tell you this. It's almost like the World Cup where logically it should happen this year, but intuitively I think this thing can go on for a lot longer than we imagine. And the reason why is right now there's only 7 companies in the stupid game, okay? As long as these 7 companies support each other, they're fine, right? So the game is set up so like we'll never figure out when they'll do it, and when they do it, it will be to the maximum benefit. Okay, if that makes any sense.
Yes, I imagine this IPO thing also would kind of play into it, right? After they IPO, or at least Tesla, I mean, SpaceX already IPO'd, so I imagine that's a signal. But okay, thank you, Professor.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks, Hannah. Dia, you had your Dia, DIA.
Hi, yeah. So thanks for taking my question. Back to Argentina. It used to be a very rich country until the Great Depression caused it to fall out of trade routes with the rest of the world. Considering that you believe that market crashes are possibly manufactured, do you think that other forces might have been behind its 20th century decline? And if so, what reasons might you have? What do you think of for that?
Right. So that's a really good question. And so just to be clear, I don't think it was the Great Depression that caused Argentina's collapse. I think it was actually the late 19th century. There was a collapse in Argentina. Their economy collapsed. Okay, so this is even before the Great Depression. And if you want to go conspiracy theorist, okay, you can make the argument that it was because transnational capital wanted to transfer capital to Argentina. And so they needed to collapse the market in order to make land cheap for their investment. But that never materialized because they recognized that America, the United States, was a better investment. Okay, so rather than the capital flowing to Argentina, it flowed to the United States instead. This was also the time, if you remember, with like this was the beginning of Zionism, right? So Theodor Herzl wrote his book, Judenstaat, basically Jewish homeland in the year 1899. And then the Balfour Declaration was I believe 1917. So this was during the time of the growth of Zionism. This is when transnational capital is trying to shift from Europe, the city of London, to the Western Hemisphere. But my intuition tells me, okay, and again, I don't know enough, but my intuition just tells me like, well, Argentina was at this time the Japan of the world, and like you have too many investments, you have too much capital in the place, and there wasn't enough industrial capacity. There wasn't enough demand for Argentina, and so the economy collapsed. Basically, it was overheating. And another way to understand this is not all things are conspiracies. A lot is just fundamentals. So if you have a really strong government, if you have a really dynamic political system, if you have a really energetic population, then the economy will do a lot better. The reason why I think that they want to do population replacement in Argentina is they recognize that people who are religious, okay, basically Hindus and the Zionists, they are going to work a lot harder to build your economy than people who are not religious. People who are not religious tend to engage in speculative behavior, like doing the least amount of work for the greatest profit. People who are non-religious also tend to become very complacent, right? Because they're not that motivated. Whereas if you're Hindu or you're Zionist, you see it as God's will that you transform the land into a great nation state. And this is why the United States became so powerful, right? Because the United States was founded by Puritans, by these religious zealots. And this explains why Utah is one of the most prosperous regions in America, because it was founded by Mormons, who again are religious zealots. So if I'm an investor, if I'm in transnational capital, I don't necessarily have an eschatological framework, but I will invest in people who do because they work harder than other people. Okay. So yeah, does that make sense, Dia? Or
Yeah, thank you. Do you mind if I ask a follow-up question
sure,
to
go ahead.
what you was this is more related to what you was talking about for the AI bubble. So about 2 years back, South Korea banned short selling, and then in 2025, they essentially became the stock market was became the most uh, performant stock market in the world. Um, do you think that has anything to do with the short selling being banned? And following up to that, I suppose one of their companies has now entered the Nasdaq in the US, and the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 are now deviating quite a bit. Do you think that any deviation there might not be part of the plan for transnational capitalism, for example?
Yeah, my intuition tells me, again, I don't know enough about South Korea to like really be able to assess the situation, but I think like the stock market collapses, it's really a sign of society in decline because it's a sign of anxiety and desperation, right? So if you go to South Korea, the inequality, the corruption in South Korea is beyond the charts, okay? And so they're really the only option for most normal people is to gamble in the stock market. And like honestly, these past few years, you've seen this massive surge in the Korean stock market. It is really the best performing stock market in the world right now. And so if you are a retail investor, you're gonna bet your life savings on the stock market. It's the same situation in Canada, where these past 5 years, we've seen a huge surge in real estate prices. And everyone was trying to jump into the real estate market, believing that well, Canada, there's only limited amount of housing. You've got all these immigrants coming into the country. So yes, the housing prices can only go up, and so people engage in really speculative behavior. And I think it's really a sign of society in decline, where there's desperation, there's anxiety that translates into a unrealistic euphoria for money making. People are engaging in speculative behavior So rather than invest, people will now gamble. And so we're seeing this in Canada, in Australia, with real estate speculation. We're also seeing that in South Korea with stock market speculation. So I just think it's a sign of capitalism decline. I think that we are approaching the end times.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Farhan, you're next. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Hello, Professor. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. You're perfect.
Yeah. Thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask about sports. You mentioned that you think the World Cup is a very significant geopolitical event, and I would definitely agree. To preface this, I guess I would say that oftentimes psychologists and sociologists talk about how sports are symbolic of war, of
Yes.
conflict, and how
Absolutely.
so even spectators are able to feel passionate about it because it's like they're part of this greater tribal group, and that the World Cup is definitely is a symbolic struggle between nations. So the question is there a way that transnational capital or the media or even maybe the occult could manipulate that tribalism for some kind of long-term strategy, whether to incite conflict or whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're absolutely right. So soccer has become the substitute for war nowadays, right? And that's why there's so much energy surrounding soccer. You got like these people who will save up literally for like 10 years just so that they can fly to America, United States, to attend a World Cup match. You've got like tens of thousands of Argentinas, and Argentina is a poor country. And these are like just middle class people. They are spending thousands on World Cup tickets, and then tens of thousands on travel, on hotel. So the World Cup really does bring out nationalistic sentiment. And I think the purpose of the World Cup is just really to embed in people's imagination the nation state as the constituent element of the world game, right? So nationalism benefits transnational capital in that if people are focused on nationalistic sentiments, on nationalism, then that allows transnational capital to manipulate everyone behind the scenes. Okay, so transnational capital can invest in both China and the United States, and then create this narrative that the United States and China are in competition with each other, which allows transnational capital to be a parasitic force on both nation states and draw energy from both. So I think that's what the game is. The game is not necessarily to manipulate people, but to distract people, to divert people's attentions from where the real action is happening. Okay, so transnational capital is able to win because it's fool people to believe that money is wealth. When really wealth is attention, it's energy, um, and um, and the entire point of the World Cup as a spectacle um, is really to make people focus on the wrong things and make people think that they are a part of a nation state as opposed to being part of humanity, being part of God. If we are to like thrive as a species, if we are really to survive the coming crises of the next few decades, we need to remember that we all have the power to create wealth for our attention, for our energy. And we also need to remember like we are all connected together. And we also need to remember that we're all connected to God. There's God in us and that we are part of God as well. And if we recognize this, then we can create a new future for humanity. And so transnational capital, they're desperate to keep us focused on the here and now. They're focused, they're determined to make us afraid and anxious. They're determined to make us focus on our rivalries and anxiety against each other. They're focused on making us think that money is the end all and be all. Okay, so I think that's really the point of the World Cup.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Um, Giovanni, are you here? Did you have a question or comment? Could you please unmute yourself? Giovanni.
Yes, Professor. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Thank you so much, Professor Chang. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Um, I saw this comment on like this guy named Henry Fang. His microphone is not working, but he had a question, so I was just going to ask that. So he said, is there validity to the reports of original Nazis escaping to Argentina? And if that were perhaps true, how does that relate to modern day Israel influence?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a historical fact. I don't think anyone denies that. If you looked at World War II, both the Vatican and the Argentine government were very supportive of Nazis. And towards the end of World War II, when it was clear that the Nazis were about to lose the war, they created all these channels to smuggle Nazis into Argentina. And this is what a lot of countries did, right? So the Soviet Union and the United States also smuggled a lot of Nazi scientists into the countries. In America, this was called Operation Paperclip. And these Nazis were responsible for the United States space program, as well as the space program of the Soviet Union. So this space race between the Soviet Union and the United States was not between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was between German scientists, Nazi scientists working for the Soviet Union, and Nazi scientists working for the United States. Okay, and the reason why is the Nazis were the first to develop advanced rocket technology, the V2 basically. And so the Argentinians wanted the Nazis for the same reason, not just ideological, but because the Nazis had tremendous expertise in the political system, in finance, economy, in business, and they want that access. And you can argue like this sort of the Nazi influence in Argentina, it's still there today. If you go to Argentina, you're gonna find entire communities of like these blonde, blue eye, Aryans. I think Argentina takes tremendous pride in being like very white, very, very Aryan. And they take tremendous pride in the fact that like, they were sympathetic towards the Nazis in World War II. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Professor Chang.
Yeah. Weislaw? Weislaw, are you here? Could you unmute yourself, please? Okay. Samsareka? Samsareka, are you here? Samsareka, do you have your hand up? Did you want to ask a question? Please unmute yourself. Okay. did you have another question? HH?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did, John. So basically, yeah. So I just want to ask, like, this is not about the World Cup directly, but it's related again about, like, like the Israel and the Zionists. So you mentioned in your lectures, and I find it very interesting how, like first of all, I learned a lot of history for you, and I did a lot of research myself. What I'm like really curious about, and I haven't really found like a definite answer on this, is like why the Jews, especially the rabbis, agree to basically like be kind of like on schedule, like routinely abused by the Catholic Church and scapegoated. Like, okay, I get like, okay, well, they let them survive and like cope with the Europeans, but it's like, well, in apocalyptic Judaism, sh if they're going to be abused like that, like for such a long time, why don't they just like rise up together? And if everyone dies, well, okay, well, like, at least we tried, right? Like, well, why would you allow yourself to be abused like that, like for like centuries? Yeah, so like, that's my question. Also, like, the Catholic Church, you said, okay, there's like secret agreements between the rabbis, and they are often scapegoated by all these terrible things. It's like, okay, well, you have messiahs like rise up, bro, like Sabbatai Zevi. Why didn't every Jew just like, okay, hey, screw it, let's just to hell with the Catholic Church. We all die. We all die. Yeah, I'm just a bit confused with that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I think the history of Judaism in Europe after Christianity It's very complicated, okay? But let me give you my understanding of what I think happened. So after the rise of both Christianity and Islam, and there were a lot of Jews who converted to Christianity and Islam. So remember, like the first Christians, like people like Paul, Peter, Jesus, they were actually Jews. And so Judaism at this point, it's basically a very minority religion, whereas during the Roman Empire, before Christianity, Jews made up about 10% of the Roman Empire. That's a lot of people, right? And in some places like Alexandria, it was a third of the population were Jews. So the Jews were a huge cultural force during the Roman Empire. And then with the rise of Christianity, with the rise of Islam, they became very minority. They became decimated over time. And during the Middle Ages, there were still pockets of Jews around Europe. And I think a lot of this history is not really fully appreciated. So I think that, yes, there were a lot of programs, there were a lot of persecutions, a lot of scapegoating of Jews, especially in the worst economic times. But I would say, like, for the majority of this history, Jews were a lot better treated than people appreciate. Okay, so let me explain the logic here. Okay, so at the time in Europe, I'm talking about the Middle Ages. There are two main powers, right? You have the feudal lords, the nobility, and you have the Catholic Church. And for the nobility, the Jews are great to work with because as nobles, you have certain problems that you need to be resolved, and Jews can help you resolve this issue. First of all, you need a captive managerial class, right? So you're a plantation owner, you need plantation managers, and you need people who are loyal to you. Well, Jews are very loyal to you because you're the only one giving them protection, right? They're minority in a Catholic area, and these Catholics are taught that the Jews killed Jesus. And so if you're a nobility and you provide protection for the Jews, well, these Jews are going to work really hard for you, and they're not going to bitch about pay and treat and like being treated better, okay? They are very loyal and obedient and hardworking workers, okay? So that's point one. Point two is at this time there's a lot of trade going on, and you want to trade with the Islamic Caliphate, right? Well, the only people who can allow you to trade with the Islamic Caliphate are the Jews because they have networks in the Islamic Caliphate, okay? So the Jews allow you to access trade networks around the world. And the third thing that's really important is Jews have access to financing. And Jews, unlike Christians, are allowed to be money lenders. And the best way to make money at this time is through usury, right? So as a Christian lord, as a Christian noble, you're not allowed to lend money to people at interest, but the Jews are, right? So you get the Jews to be the scapegoat for you. And again, throughout most of history, this relationship is fine. The Jews are able to accumulate wealth, and they give you a huge portion of this wealth. Jews work hard for you, and Jews allow you to access trade in the Islamic Caliphate. So, from the perspective of the nobility, this is a great relationship. Jews put up with this because it allows them to practice their religion and it allows them to stay together as a community, okay? The Catholic Church sees Jews also as an asset because and Augustine writes about this in his writings. But Augustine's point is, if we are truly to get the Catholic people to appreciate the privilege of being Catholic, you need to create the other. You need to create a people to show Catholics what happened if you give the faith. And the answer is the Jews, right? So you create Jews as this alien other, and you create artwork, you create these writings that chastise them, that insult them, but you basically promote anti-Semitism, but it's a controlled anti-Semitism, right? And so again, throughout most of this time, this relationship worked out well for the Catholic Church, worked out well for the nobility, and worked out well for the Jews. And then there are certain times when the nobility is so corrupt, when the Catholic Church is so corrupt that the people rise up. In which case, what do? You blame the Jews, right? You divert their attention to the Jews. You plant spies, you plant agents within these peasant uprisings, and you get them to direct their anger at the Jews. Okay? And then if things get really bad, what do? You expel the Jews from your land. They go to the Islamic Caliphate, or who cares where they go, and that makes people feel a lot better. Okay, and so you have this very unstable relationship where, okay, most of the time things are working out great, but in times of calamity, in times of famine, in terms of like Black Death, Jews become the scapegoats, and this is important for us to appreciate because the same dynamic could turn out today, where okay, it seems like Zionists and Jews control the world. But they only do so as long as the ruling elite are tolerate them, right? And we have to remember, like, when things get really bad, if there's economic collapse, if there's famine, well, the elite is gonna direct our anger towards the Jews. So this is something that this is a history that's not really discussed, but it's something that we really need to appreciate if we are to understand what might happen next 10, 20 years. Okay? Does that make sense, HH?
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely does make sense, but like like the key point about like why obviously the Jews, like at first, okay, that kind of benefits us because we get a trade and they have these secret understandings, but then once they get like abused so much, why would they just like keep sort of like accept the fact that they're second class or like subhumans,
Yeah.
and at any time they can be disposed by a higher power. So they're kind of like conscientiously accepting that they are a second class people. Why would they do that? Because it's not like once or twice. It's like a
Yeah.
like very serious, pogroms, and they're like
Yeah.
expelling. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's actually a very easy but cynical explanation for this. And the answer is if the Jews just converted en masse, the rabbis would lose all their power, right? The Jewish elite would have absolutely no power, right? Like, so really, this is really to justify the rabbis and to ensure they continue their power. So remember, the thing about the rabbis is that it's dynastic. So the rabbis pass on the power to their authority to their sons and to their grandsons as well. So it's passed within the family. So the rabbis are basically the aristocracy of the Jews. And in order for the aristocracy, the rabbis to maintain power, you have to have Jews, right? So, so you create a situation where, okay, you explain to the Jews this persecution, it is the will of God, and God wants you to be persecuted to force you to redeem yourself, to repent, to recognize God as a supreme authority, to welcome God into your bosom, and then God will send the Messiah to you. So I hate to say this, and it's a really cynical explanation, but in any society, the elite are looking to justify and rationalize their power over the people. And you know what? It would probably be in the best interest of the Jews to basically convert to the whatever local religion, and so everyone gets along. And honestly, this is what's been happening throughout most of human history. Like if you go to a new region, then you convert to the local religion. The other thing is like, before the rise of Christianity, most communities were extremely tolerant. They were polytheistic. They were like, like if you want to be a Jew, fine, we don't care. But you also have to like, welcome our gods as well. But the Jews were distinct in that they only accepted their own God as the legitimate God. And they, the first commandment is do not worship false idols, right? So they disparage and refuse to accept other gods, and that's what got in trouble with the Romans, right? So that's a cynical explanation. I'm not sure that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it seems like the rabbi is kind of like the medieval PMC in a way, like a medieval professional managerial class.
Well, they're the
Yeah,
Jewish aristocracy, right?
yeah.
Right.
Okay, I mean, look, this guy, Colton, can I just ask a question like on his behalf because he says his mic is broken.
Sure, go
He said
ahead.
it's kind of related actually. It's kind of related. It's like, okay, Prof. Jiang, you've spoken of moving to from atheism after encountering Dante, assessing higher forces slash God in teaching, yet not identifying as traditionally religious. How does your understanding of eschatology connect with your view of God and absolute truth? And what is your perspective on the Abrahamic religions in relation to that? Yeah, this is
Yeah,
like a Cole's question. I'm just asking. Yeah.
sure. Okay, so I don't see myself as religious. I think that religion is too organized for me. I see myself as spiritual. And what I mean by that is rather than adhering to doctrine, I adhere to intuition. And my intuition tells me like we are all part of God and God is part of us. I have a lot of issues with eschatology. And my main theory is that we have eschatology because of the Proto-Indo-European religion. So the Proto-Indo-European religion is unique in human history in that it's really the first religion, first systematic religion that believes that violence is what created the universe. Okay, so before the Proto-Indo-Europeans, most traditions describe to a animistic or a mother goddess understanding, which is a belief in the balance and harmony of the world, and that we're all part of the mother goddess and we're all part of nature. And so Proto-Indo-Europeans are imperialistic in that they believe that it's violence that created the world. And so the most basic myth of the Proto-Indo-Europeans is like in the beginning they were twins, okay? And then one twin had to kill the other in order to found the world. And this is a myth that becomes a template for, the Roman religion where Romulus has to kill Remus in order to found Rome. It becomes the foundation for many religions, especially the Abrahamic religions. And the thing is that, like, if you believe the world was created by through violence, you also have to believe the world must end with violence, and that's why you have eschatology. Okay, so the Proto-Indo-Europeans gave us both Zoroastrianism, as well as Judaism, and over time, both of these will become extremely eschatological. So that's my understanding of what happened. But what this means is like the world doesn't necessarily need to be eschatological. But unfortunately, we're controlled by people who believe in eschatology because, as I said previously, people who believe in eschatology tend to be very violent people. And people who are very violent will often be able to amass more power than those people who are not violent. Okay. Kitty, did you have a question?
I will ask a quick question. I don't want to keep you from going to the Iran politics. Um, the question I have is, I really appreciate your lecture series on Dante. That was very new. I did not have any idea about Christianity before that, so it was beautiful how you extracted messages of love and wisdom from that. But what also stood out was your interaction with the students, the way you talked with each other and kind of got a new perspective. Did you also plan to have more sessions like these on different epics that humanity has to offer? Because there might be things that are hidden in open out there that we might benefit from if you were to look at it, and if we had those discussions together.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I would love to do a summer series on the Vedas, on the occult, on the teachings of, say, maybe Manly P. Hall and Rudolf Steiner, because I think like these texts would lend themselves to great discussions. And the reason why I taught the Dante seminar is I want to learn. I never read Dante in full. I've taught Dante before, but I've never really read him from like line to line. And just reading him line to line just opened my eyes. And as you can appreciate, doing it in a seminar style really drove learning for everyone. So I would love to do it again. I would love to do a seminar on the Bible, on the Vedas, on text that I would struggle with if I were to read them by myself, but which I would be much more motivated to learn if I were doing it in a group. Okay, so thanks so much for that, Kitty. Westlaw, can you unmute yourself, please? And
Yes,
ask
I am
your-
here.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
last time I didn't realise
No worries.
that wasn't going.
Yeah.
Look, my question was, are the failing authoritarian empires sensing this is their last opportunity for their projected colonial ambitions? And so what options has the rest of humanity at its disposal to resist invasions from these and emerging authoritarian empires? Because they're all following suit, aren't they? They're realizing that
Musa,
the
you want to
power
do
is
your
in
reverse, Elisha?
authoritarianism.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay. Yeah, so I think like watching the World Cup was interesting for me because you're absolutely right in like, they are accelerating the process and they're moving very fast. But it seems like the people within the movement have become arrogant and lazy and complacent. Okay. And an example I will use is, the Zionist takeover of the American media ecosystem. So the Ellisons have bought CBS Viacom and they plan to take over CNN and they want to install Barry Weiss into these institutions. And the logic is, well, we've lost the young people, we've lost the global population, but as long as we keep the boomers, we're okay. And that's a fine strategy. But then, you look at what's happening, and Barry Weiss is just incompetent. And the journalists working under her are just disgusted with her management. She keeps herself locked in a room surrounded by security. So she refuses to engage with the staff. So yes, the Zionists, transnational capital, the empire, they have all the power, but at the same time, it just seems like they're just exhausted themselves. And they have a script in place, and they're trying to finish the script as quickly, as easily, as lazily as possible. And I think all this will collapse in their face. I think everything's gonna blow up in their face. I think I think they're just done for. And maybe they're in power for another 5 years, but I don't think they will achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I think you're right. What options have we in humanity, the majority in the world, and many, I suppose, who were naive like I was? I must say, before I heard a number of your lectures about some of these forces that are operating around us, and we're supposed to swim in this evil sea.
Yeah, so my best advice is to reclaim your attention, right? To recognize that you do matter, that everything you do does matter. It has an impact on the universe. So if you reclaim your attention, you start focusing on things that you enjoy doing and which further the imagination of humanity, then you are winning this battle, okay? So I would just say read a lot, teach, go for long walks in the park, get away from social media, and first and foremost, start teaching, start giving. And teaching could just be like, having a conversation with a neighbor where you're sharing some ideas that you might have learned from my class. Maybe helping young people start to read books again. So just like acts of generosity and kindness are going to go a long way in making a better world. I know it can seem insignificant, but trust me, it all adds up.
We need to join our life preservers together, don't we? So that we can go together as a very large raft on this crazy sea.
That's right. That's right. And that's what I'm hoping to do. And that's why, we're having these Zoom discussions because I'm trying to figure out who's out there and what we can do together. So thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Karina, did you have a question? Karina.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great. Yeah, I had a question. I've been, kind of researching a bit about like the Kabbalah and like, what that really is.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a couple things, especially by listening to like Tony Kissinek online, that there's like a couple misconceptions, I guess, out there about like the Kabbalah. I originally thought it was just for Jewish people, but it seems that the I guess the Torah and the Gemara were created as like a way for people to find spirituality if they couldn't read the primary text of the Kabbalah, since it was written in the like language of branches. And I notice a lot of like similarities with the way Dante's Divine Comedy is written, and the way like you grab that book, and depending on how wise you are, you're able to actually read that book more and reach spirituality that way as well, even if it's completely separated from a Jewish text. And I've started to do a little bit more research on that, and I realized that I know that there's a Shabbat campaign that kind of takes Kabbalah in a negative way, and it basically is like their method of, I guess, urgency for their final goal is like global outreach to get everyday people to execute physical rituals. So like it's like a mass of people that they want to get together to do the same thing. But then there's also like the Ashalagian vision, which is, their method of urgency is basically widespread education to change the internal desire of mankind by correcting their ego. And it's more of a promotion of like global society structured entirely on giving and unity, which is a lot of what you say, which is like you should be receiving to give. And I just wanted to kind of get your comment on that, if that's kind of how you see the world, where you're trying to receive to be able to bestow onto everyone else.
No, I completely agree. The Kabbalah, it's a wonderful work, and the Kabbalah draws on the greatest traditions of humanity, right? So, like, I'm actually reading Manly P. Hall right now, and he shows us how, all these previous traditions, and it includes the Egyptian tradition, Isis, the legend of Isis, and Osiris. You go look at the legend of Penelope, and Orpheus, Dionysus, and it all goes back to the idea of the Kabbalah. Okay, so the Kabbalah is drawing on all these ancient traditions that have been lost over time, but the main idea is that ultimately humanity is a whole. And for a variety of reasons, we've decided to splinter ourselves up into different fragments. And the other thing is humanity, we humans are divine spiritual beings. And through a very long process, we've descended into the material world, and we've turned hell into heaven, right? We've come down into this material world, and we've adopted a more mineral mentality. We basically prioritize the body over the spirit. And if we are to redeem ourselves, if we are really to achieve our full potential, we need to prioritize our soul, our spirit above our bodies. But it's hard. It's so easy to just enjoy bodily pleasures like food and sex and wine, and really hard to truly embrace spiritual pleasures such as giving to others, teaching others, being kind to others. And this is the ultimate struggle. So the battle of heaven and hell is actually all within us. So I completely agree with everything you said.
Okay, great. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So HH, did you have a question? And then after you finish, I'll move very quickly to the Iran war.
Okay. Yeah. So I've asked a lot of questions. This is my last one. Basically, I was born in China as well, Jiang. I was born in Shandong. So I'm a Shandong.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm sure Shandong. I think you really appreciate. Have you been in Shandong before or not?
No, I have not. Actually, it's weird, but I've never been to Shandong. No.
It's kind of like the Texas of China.
Okay.
People like people like much more traditional, people much more like, Confucian. Yes, it's pretty sexist because women kind of it's the birthplace of Confucianism, right?
That's right.
Shandong, yeah. So look, I came to Australia when I was like very young, and I found your lectures. The most interesting thing I found, and the way I sort of discovered you actually was through your talks about how consumerism is the perfection of slavery. Now, I just found that as such a powerful kind of like quote, and I've just memorized that for the rest of my life. Um, it really speaks to me because you see, like, you've spoken a lot about how like China's education system is hopeless, and you try to like changing it, but it's like very hopeless. Can you talk more about like how like in the big cities, and also I see you go to Japan recently. I myself been to Japan quite a few times, like as
Mm.
a tourist. I want to go there to actually do a scholarship through their like whatever thing. And when I was there the first few times, I found it like really fun. The more I study the society, like East Asian, East Asian, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, China, these sort of societies, it seems to me the reason why they're collapsing and the population is like imploding, and there's so much like mental illnesses. We have a joke like mental illness maxing, like Japan's always like got crazy people going around killing people. China, I think in recently 2023 in Hainan, there was like a car that plowed like 30 people. But basically, the country has a huge mental health crisis. I think what's happening is it's kind of like these are societies where they went from feudalism and sort of like jumped straight into like industrial capitalism, and then sort of like rushed into consumerism as well. And I think consumerism really is a big issue in Asia where all young people care about is, okay, do I look sexy? Do I have big boobs and ass? Is my skin pale white? Am I Snow White? And all they care about is like LV bags and Gucci bags.
Yeah.
Like seriously, like Korea, like kids as young as 14 years old, I think there's like 40% of like some shit like that, like have plastic surgery.
Yeah.
It's like a society imploding. Could you guys like explain more about your observations about, because even Beijing, like sort of big metropolitan cities, and like what is the psychology of young people? And do you really think it's this unholy marriage between like Confucian, like hierarchy and like let's say like a capitalist, soulless consumerism? It's a lot of buzzwords, but like you get what I mean, yeah? Yeah, that idea. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I completely agree with your assessment. I've been here in China for the past 25 plus years, and I'm just appalled by the level of materialism in this country. And I've been trying for 25 years to try to get people to be much more intellectual, be much more enlightened. And they just think I'm just crazy. They just think that, I'm a troublemaker. They literally use the term troublemaker. I've been fired from a lot of schools. And I mean, even though I'm kind of popular right now in the West, I'm still like a pariah figure here in China. And I think a lot of it is they suspect me. I mean, like it's not just materialism, but it's also how materialism warps the imagination of people here. And in China, like black is white, white is black. So, I mean, I make these comments, and maybe people in the West find me insightful because it aligns with a lot of people's intuitions in the West. But here in China, people think I'm a retard. They literally think I'm stupid. They literally think that I'm just making this crap out of nowhere, and I'm just like bullshitting everyone. And they just think like they literally believe this. And this is like an upside down, bizarre society. So I think it's much deeper than just materialism. It's also like just like a complete lack of faith in God. I mean, like I live in China. It's like a godless society, and I was in Japan, and I think you're absolutely right. Like it's a fun place to visit. I would never want to live there because I'm not Japanese. Japan is a very cohesive, very conformist society, and I think you're absolutely right in like these societies in the long term, they're not going to survive if if you insist on this materialistic, godless worldview, then ultimately you're going to collapse as a society over time. And so even though there are a lot of issues in the West, the issues are a lot more stark here in East Asia, right? So you look at the birth rate, the fertility rate. That's the greatest sign that the people have absolutely no faith in your own society, right? When the young people absolutely refuse to have children. And like it's like I mean in South Korea, I think the fertility rate right now is like 0.6, Japan is 1. In China, it's 1, and it's like it's I think like in 5 years' time, the Chinese fertility rate is going be lower than South Korea. Let me tell you a really like incredible statistic. So I have 3 kids. My wife and I, we have three kids, 3 wonderful kids. And my wife, when she went to college in Beijing, she had like 7 roommates. So there's 8 of them all together, okay? And my wife, she's a lot younger than I am. She's in her 30s now. And by now, women should have had 1 or 2 child, okay? So 8 women, and all together they had like collectively they have like 3 kids. So only my wife has had children. All her other roommates, and these are like middle class people, right? Who do not have financial problems. They refuse to have kids here. So I think we are looking at really the end of East Asia. That's like literally what I believe. People talk about the East Asian century. People talk about the East Asian miracle. No, I think we are moving towards the end of East Asia, and I don't know what comes after this. Okay, so thanks so much, HH. So let me very quickly go to Iran. Okay, the Iran war, and I'm going to share my screen now, and I want to be quick about this because I've been talking for almost 2 hours now, and I'm getting pretty tired. But let me talk very quickly about the Iran war because I'm very troubled by what's happening. Basically, what I'm observing these past few days is like it's become a clusterfuck. It's a dumpster fire now. Um, I'm really worried about what's happening, guys, because it seems as though the Americans, the United States, is going to escalate rapidly within the next week or so. And people are talking about ground forces. So this is a map of what a ground invasion of Iran would look like. I have no idea who created this, but it seems pretty right to me. They want to attack from 3 axes, okay? Basically from Iraq. So they send in Kurds from Iraq. They send in the Balochs from Pakistan, and then you have the Americans trying to wrestle control from the IRGC because they're trying to control the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so this is what they might be looking at. This would be the greatest clusterfuck in recent memory. Okay, it would be a dumpster fire. This would be an absolute catastrophe for the Americans. Okay, so let me go over why. First of all, there's no way you're going to get the Kurds to become suicide bombers. Okay, this is like literally what the Americans are saying to the Kurds. We'll give you weapons, we'll give you lots of US dollars as long as you send your men to die off in the mountains of Iran. And the goal is not to actually win against Iran. The goal is to draw the IRGC so we can bomb them and make ourselves look better on TV. That's like literally the goal, to have like better PR. Because right now the PR is just terrible for us. And the Kurds are like basically like, we'll take your money, we'll take your weapons, but otherwise screw you, man. So this is gonna be a complete clusterfuck here, okay? There's no way the Kurds go in for the Americans, but I think the Kurds will just rip off the Americans. Same thing with the Balochs. Why are the Balochs gonna go in and sacrifice themselves for the Americans? That's just ridiculous. The real issue is in the Strait of Hormuz, where I think Trump has it in his mind that if you capture these islands, Qassam Island, Karg Island, then the Iranians will be forced to surrender. Just as he got into his head that if you kill the Ayatollah, the Iranians would surrender. So unfortunately, what's happening is the Americans want to win this war as quickly as possible, at as little cost as possible. And if you want to win this war, you have to invest like 4 years and 2 million troops. That's the only way. Okay, so this ground invasion can only be a dumpster fire. The good news, though, is like I think they can't do it right now because it's too hot. They might attempt to take a couple of islands But a full-scale ground invasion, they have to wait until the weather gets cooler, which would basically mean November, and ideally December. Okay, so that is what the ground invasion looks like. What this is like really weird, but whoever is coming up with these plans do not factor in Iranian topography. Like how do you send in forces against mountains? I mean, like, I don't understand what these people are thinking right now. Like, is the military leadership of America right now completely divorced from all reality? Why don't you just look at a map and ask yourself, like, is it feasible to send in ground forces against mountains? It's not feasible, man. It just is not. This is why um, anytime anyone's attempted to invade Persia, it's ended in disaster. And like the Americans want to do this in a quick time frame, right? Maybe in the next year they want this war to end. It's not going to end in a year. This is going to be another forever war. But right now, what's happening is um, they're publicizing these deaths of American soldiers, these casualties. And when that happens, it just means like the American military is preparing for doubling down on this war because you have to avenge these soldiers, right? So the American military policy is leave no man behind. So if someone gets trapped in Iran, as these pilots got trapped in Iran a few months ago, you go send in like 2,000 soldiers to get them out, okay? Now, if you have soldiers dying in this war, you have to go and avenge them. Another really important map I will show you is this. You see how right now there are two choke points. Okay, you have the Strait of Hormuz, which is what's being controlled right now by the IRGC, but you also have down here the Bab el Maghdad Strait, which is now being controlled by the Houthis. The problem with both straits is you can't dislodge either the Houthis or the IRGC because they're all secluded in mountains. It's so easy to choke these straits, and so guys, this is gonna be a complete dumpster fire. It's a complete clusterfuck. This war is gonna escalate rapidly over the next couple of weeks. Already, the Americans are targeting power plants and desalination plants in Iran. In response, the Iranians are doing the same thing. They're targeting these desalination plants in Kuwait. And the GCC is done for. I don't see how this war now de-escalates. I don't see how things don't become a complete clusterfuck for the entire world. Okay, so I just point this out to everyone. Any questions or comments? Karina, sorry, I see Karina. Karina, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything that you're saying. I was actually kind of writing an article about this because I am trying to do what you said, try to teach to understand this stuff more. And I mean, there is this weird intersection that I am seeing where like you have stated in the past where Israel's created this total enemy, and they see them I mean their political rivals as like completely evil. So I mean there is no de-escalation or negotiations when you see someone as evil.
Yeah.
You feel like you're mandated to kill your political opponents. And you see that especially how they see the Palestinian people. They've almost just jumbled them together with how they see Hamas and Hezbollah and everything. That combined with the U.S.'s empire in decline, and the U.S. just being incredibly desperate to figure something else out because they have this ticking time bomb of debt on their hands. And then if you kind of see it as like kind of like a Venn diagram, when you have geopolitical tensions abroad, and then you compare that with the political tensions within the U.S., with just the demographics in general, it's kind of hard not to see that the intersection between the two is going to be a sacrifice of the youth, because you're kind of feeding one into the other. You're feeding the I guess the unruly youth that are going to be upset about their country basically falling apart in front of them into this war machine. My question to you though is that when you have two partners that are completely unified in their respective missions, you know, with Israel having the eschatological fervor of wanting to, kill the world if it means killing their enemies. Like they're set on, Pax Judaica or the Greater Israel Project, and then you have the U.S. that's completely set on maintaining their empire and getting control of these chokeholds. I don't see how I don't see how they're ever going to come down from that. I think it's either like they're going to do it or die trying, and we're kind of just the casualties of war.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry. Your analysis is perfect. I have nothing to add to your analysis. It's just perfect. I'm sorry to say that, but like I completely agree with your assessment.
And I mean, so okay, so I'm Gen Z, right? And obviously, like I'm writing this and I'm learning about this, and it's highly depressing because, these are like my classmates, these
Yeah.
are my friends. But we're all interconnected, even the millennial class. I mean, I'm sure the conscription age will get to a higher point where they're trying to enlist
Yes.
people in their 30s. And I mean, those are our brothers, and you go up to our parents and you go up to our grandparents. Like all of the generations are interconnected together. And it's very difficult to, study this and learn more about this when you're basically just reading about how everything else around us is going to collapse. I guess another question would be is how do you continue to learn more about this, teach more about this when you know that it's just widening your viewpoint on the disaster that's happening around you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I mean, it's a very strange process where you start learning this, and the first reaction is just anger at these people for their incompetence, for their lack of any human sympathy, for their callousness. Okay, you're just angry now. But then as you learn more, you become more depressed and recognize that this is the totality of the system. And there's very little that you can do about it. And the more you learn, you're like, wait a minute here. If I know what's happening, that's a sense of empowerment. That's a sense of liberation. At least I won't die ignorant. At least I'll die knowing what happened. And then you look for solutions and you recognize that, wow, I'm not alone in my sentiments. I like when I first started doing my YouTube channel, I had no idea that millions would start watching my videos. And like that surprised me. I'm like, why is this happening? Because all I'm talking about is how the world is ending. And I'm obviously not, I'm also not doing it in like clear English. I'm not articulate in the way that a lot of people on media are articulate. And also the production qualities are just complete crap, man. It's like literally me turning on the computer and then me doing a lecture for 40 minutes and then turn it off. And like, why are they watching this? And so I think this same process will happen with you, Karina, where you start writing these articles, you start making these comments, and then people are gonna come to you and says, "Hey, tell me more." And like just the fact that people are interested in your ideas and people are willing to have a conversation means that there's hope for the world. That there's hope for the world because people are waking up, right? So I think that's I'm completely surprised by this where only because like for the past 2 years I've only been talking about the most depressing things, but the fact that I'm talking about these depressing things have given people hope as well as myself hope, because it means that we humans are capable of knowing what is right, what is wrong, and we want a better life for ourselves, for our neighbors, for our friends, and for our children. And so we're going to work hard to achieve this. So I think this is a process, and we're only at the beginning stage of this process, but I think that we'll come out pretty good at the end of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely, when I, started learning about this stuff, I think at the end of it, from like the conclusion of just, writing and getting back into writing, I just realized that like I feel like the only real way out of this is for everyone to, pick a movement and to do whatever they can to support it, whether that's with time or writing or financially or, just, I mean, I've seen comedians do comedic stand-up doing it or singing or writing, or I mean, I feel like that's the only way for us to be able to get through this is for everyone to stop being like a spectator in it and to just express themselves through their own their advantage point, whatever they're good at.
Exactly. Thanks so much. Yep, that's exactly right, Karina. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, AK, could you unmute yourself, please? AK.
Yes, Professor. Good morning. Thank you for the meeting. I just have a question. I'm a GCC citizens, actually, specifically Oman.
Yes.
And I would like to know your perspective on the geopolitical scenarios for Oman and the current situations, given the neutrality that we are practicing with our foreign neighbors and with Iran specifically.
Yeah, so Oman was the mediator for the nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. And in the beginning, Iran saw Oman as a potential ally, right? And that's why Iran was willing to share the Strait of Hormuz with Oman. But I think that things have developed to a point where Iran sees everyone in the GCC as an enemy now. So Oman is no longer neutral in this war. Iran does see Oman as part of this American-Israel axis. And so right now, Iran is targeting Bahrain, Kuwait, but Jordan. But over time, I think that Iran will be basically like, you know what, screw this, let's just blow up the GCC. What's happened is that this MOU, the ceasefire, the failure of this MOU and ceasefire has basically given a lot of power to the IRGC. Because remember, the Ayatollah, Mojtaba Khamenei, he was actually opposed to this MOU because he thought the Americans would not honor it. But he said that, well, I'm opposed to this, but I listened to my advisors, I listened to the president, and so I agreed to the MOU. And the fact that this MOU has failed is basically making the hardliners in Iran much more determined to fight this war at an eschatological level, okay? So as this war progresses, it becomes eschatological. It basically means a fight to the finish. No more compromise, no more ceasefire. That said, this will be a very long process. So it's possible in August, there's another ceasefire for another few more weeks. But I think that the general trend is towards an eschatological conflict, where Israel wants to achieve the Greater Israel Project. There are many in the American military, like Peter Hegseth, who sees this war as bringing in as causing the return of Jesus. And then you have the Iranians who see this war as leading to a rise of the 12th Imam, who will lead the Iran to total victory against the great Satan, okay? So the prospects are not very good for the GCC in general. But I also think that what's going to happen over time is this war is going to expand outwards to encompass the Caucasus, right? Azerbaijan, Armenia, and then it's going to link up with the war in Ukraine, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia will be involved at some point. So we are in World War III, unfortunately, and this is just going to expand outwards over time. Okay. All right. Wysaw, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. I was just wondering, at the beginning of Trump's campaign, of course, he had the fossil fuel CEOs granting him $1 million each as part of the political donations. And I think he himself admitted that he was expecting oil to spike to $200 a barrel, but it didn't. Because of manipulation of the market and so on. Is it possible that he's going to prolong the war until these oil barons get either higher oil prices or the plundered Venezuelan and Middle Eastern oil as a quid pro quo? And then, of course, they're going to make money as the markets crash because it has gone up so high, the oil price, I mean, with their put options that they've probably already got in place. So that's when the markets crash and they've already sold their options and will profit incredibly quickly from the crash of the markets. And it sounds like this is where they're heading on a financial level. But then the whole Greater Israel and Pax Judaica seems to be the main factor. As we're seeing sort of anti-Semitic sort of inquiries here in Australia, where it looks like they're trying to, frighten the whole Jewish community to achieve that Pax Judaica thing where the Jews are supposed to return back to the Middle East, too scared in their countries that they're in at the moment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So a few comments. Number one is I think they're not concerned about oil prices. Maybe they were concerned about oil prices a couple months ago when they were afraid of the impact on the global economy. But I think that the war has progressed to a point where they just want to win it at all costs. So the oil price is not an issue. I think the real issue is not the spike in oil prices. I think the real issue is the collapse in oil demand, meaning, it's possible like the global economy suffers so much that the global economy basically just collapses, which would just mean a collapse in global demand. And I would argue that's actually the main reason why oil prices have not collapsed, because China has been working very diligently to ensure oil prices do not spike. All right, because really, China is completely dependent on the global economy. It's an export economy. If global demand collapses, China collapses as well. Right, so this is an existential crisis for China in a way that it's not for anyone else. So I would say China's in a lot of trouble right now. I think that people have lost control over the situation. Right now, there's so much emotion, there's so much anger, and Trump wants to win this war at all costs. The American military wants vengeance for being humiliated so far in the Middle East. And I think a lot of things will happen naturally, but the idea that now you have these people behind the scenes manipulating things, maybe that was true a few months ago. It's no longer true today. Now I think it's just a complete dumpster fire, and we'll start really feeling it later in the fall. Okay,
It's almost like a mob rule on a global scale.
I think
isn't
so.
it?
I think so. I think it's a dumpster fire now. I think
Because
the
one
idea,
thing that
yeah.
people are focusing on oil, but they're forgetting that there needs to be supplies going back to the Middle East to provide not only the equipment they need for the desalination, so they've got water, and 3 days without water, you're dead. 3 weeks without food, you're dead. So there's nothing about food going in. There's nothing about medicines. And more importantly, for the rest of the world, the precursors that predominate from that area, from that region, is not getting out either. So
Right.
we will see our medicine reserves in each country starting to get rapidly depleted. And that is something that we're not really sort of keeping a close watch on. So we've really got to get rid of this mob rule as fast as we can.
Yeah, no, I think people cannot possibly imagine the world in 3 months' time. We are really in uncharted territory, and there's no turning back. I think we've crossed the Rubicon. This war in Iran is a forever war, and the impact on the global economy, on our lives, is something that we can't possibly imagine. Okay, but we will feel it very soon. Okay, so thanks a lot. Ron
Thank you.
Fritz, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you for your time, by the way. So my question is, why does Iran not receive more support from the broader Muslim world?
Yeah.
Is it primarily because of traditional animosity between Shiite and Sunni Muslims, or are there other factors? And if it is primarily that traditional rivalry or animosity, is that just a constant in this equation, or could that possibly change as this war heats up?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Exactly. So the Shia are about 10% of the total Muslim population around the world, and Shia and Sunni rivalry goes back to ever since the time of Muhammad, right? So there's a lot of bad blood between these two groups. And the Arabs and the Persian rivalry is another factor. Saudi Arabia hates Iran. In fact, I've argued that Saudi Arabia was one of the major proponents of this war, and Saudi Arabia would want a ground invasion of Iran at some point. So this rivalry goes back a long time. What will change the equation, I think, is if Israel destroys the Al-Aqsa Mosque. If the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed, this is going to cause political revolutions throughout the Islamic world. Right now, there are a lot of governments throughout the Islamic world that have been co-opted by the United States, Malaysia, Indonesia, definitely the GCC, Pakistan. These are all co-opted by the CIA. But if the Al-Aqsa Mosque were to be destroyed, accidentally maybe, then you would have tremendous anger in the streets. There'll be political revolutions everywhere. And a lot of these people would look to Iran as their savior. So this would change the equation significantly. Okay?
No, thank you.
All right. We have Brian Murphy. So, Brian Murphy, could you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. First, appreciate you immensely, everything you're doing. My bigger comment here, in relation to what you spoke about, previous lectures about Rome, Rome's ideas as far as hate and inverting everything from love to hate. Do you think that's what's playing into a lot of this? And so obviously the opposite would be an overflow of love. So that's the main purpose at this point, is for us to spread as much love as possible.
I completely agree. I think that the elite, they maintain power through spreading emotions of hatred, fear, and anxiety, right? That's why consumerism is so important. That's why materialism is so important. That's why conflict is so important. If you look at mass culture, mass media, it's all about igniting as much conflict as possible, especially between the left and right. And a lot of this conflict, it's artificial. If you just talk to any person, most people would agree on 99% of issues. But like there's just 1% of issue that they basically farm for engagement, right? They just blow it up proportion and they farm for engagement. But most people are anti-war, most people are anti-empire, most people are anti-greed, anti-corruption. And the solution is to find unity, right? To find love, to really start believing that you can impact the world for the better, and try to find things that unite us rather than divide us. Okay, so thank you, Brian. Melina, are you here? Melina.
Milena, yes, hi, Professor. I have a question for you. Can you please explain me how come it's so difficult to invade a country that has some mountains like Iran, and how come nevertheless the United States wants to do it?
Well, it's just logistics, right? So, like, look at when the Germans invaded France. It was so easy because the French had roads that you could drive your tanks on, and then the French had gas stations, right? So you drive a bit, and then you run out of gas. Well, you just go to the gas station, you fill up your tank, and then you keep on going. That's why the Germans were able to conquer Western Europe so quickly, because the infrastructure was there for conquest. But then they went to Operation Barbarossa when they tried to invade the Soviet Union, and they were like, it's a complete dumpster fire because there was no roads, there was no gas, and the war machine just got bogged down everywhere. Okay, but the thing is, and it's really important, is Soviet Union was flat. Now imagine you pull this crap in the desert where there are mountains, right? It's very hot. So it's very easy for your electronic equipment to get overloaded, overheated. Your tanks, your equipment will run out of gas really quickly. It's very easy to get lost. It's very arduous to climb the mountains, and it's very hard for you to establish port operating bases, right? Places where you can rest your troops. So the idea, like they'll just cruise through Iran is just nonsense. Also, the American military was not set up to fight a long, protracted war. They do blitzkrieg. They do quick operations. So think of the war in Iraq in 2003, where they were able to win the war in about 2 weeks' time. They were doing these thunder runs around Baghdad, where they just sent in their Humvees and just rode around town for a couple of hours, and no one could stop them. Okay. Um, so yeah, so you have this American strategy that has been refined over its decades of warfare, and then the strategy does not work against mountains. Okay, does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, makes sense. But how come the states want to do it? Why are they? How are they want to go for it?
Because it's a dumpster fire now, because these people live in their bubbles in Washington, D.C. They suffer no consequences for their actions, right? So, like, if America loses the war, they go home. That's it. Look at what happened in Vietnam. Look at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. They lost all these wars, and nothing happened to the general brass. The bureaucracy is completely insulated from the consequences of war, so they can make stupid decisions and not suffer any consequences. And honestly, as long as this war continues, they still benefit politically as well as financially, right? So the war machine in America benefits a great deal. As long as they follow orders from Trump, they'll get promoted in the bureaucracy. So you have a ridiculous situation where, for the first time in human history, you have an empire which has a military bureaucracy that can never suffer any consequences for their stupidity in war. This has never happened before. Okay. All right. Roma, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So obviously this whole situation created a lot of memes in our lives in a way. And one of the memes I just wanted to briefly explain to you all. And why I'm mentioning this is because I think it's unfortunately a pretty decent way to understand the situation in the part of it. So basically, if you are president of the United States, right, you buy oil stock, and then you bomb Iran, right? So oil goes up, you sell your stock, you say peace is near, then oil goes down and you buy oil stock again, and you can continue this indefinitely, right? So I think I may be wrong, but this is in the light of the poly market stuff, in the light of corruption that's going on, it is pretty decent way to understand at least the part of what's going on and the motivation between it. And basically it means that whatever you as a person believed maybe in the past that government exists to protect us all, it's just not the case anymore, or maybe it never was the case. So I just wanted to share this idea, and because I feel like this is being kind of ridiculous, but it is pretty much accurate given these days and what's going on.
Thanks a lot for that. You're absolutely right. This is another sign of empire decline, where the elite is completely corrupt and incompetent. Thank you. Oz, are you here? Oz, did you have a question or comment? Oz. All right.
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, please.
I have one comment and one question.
Sure.
I think earlier somebody asked if the entire Muslim world doesn't support Iran because of Shia Sunni issues. I think a lot of it is also because so many of the governments of the Sunni countries are basically vassals of the U.S. and Israel, whether it's through money or whether it's through power or whatever it is. Certainly, Syria and the UAE and many other examples. That's, I think, a bigger reason. And the question I have for you is the recent speech that Trump gave, where he was very cantankerous towards China, very belligerent towards China. Does that change the way China might behave vis-a-vis the Iran war?
Yeah, that's a great question. My read on Trump's comments on China is it was basically just theater. Okay, he was not that serious about it. He's just looking for any pretext to interfere more in local elections, right? To have more control over state elections. So he's basically building the narrative that will allow him to federalize elections, to basically just take over the midterms. That's the real intention. He doesn't really care about China. He cares about the midterms, and he cares about staying in
Rachel?
power for a third term.
Rachel?
Okay. All right. Sorry. Earl Grey, Alistair, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you, Professor. During one of the last streams, I asked you about Central Asia, and you covered it briefly, just saying that things can spark here and there. But I was wondering if you could quickly just put things in the perspective of game theory. So if I just can offer a little context, I spent a lot of time in post-Soviet space. And all of these countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, like with the exception of Afghanistan and more regions as you go west, like all those countries, they have been kind of operating in this way of trying not to mess with Putin or piss him off in geopolitical sense, since USSR basically fell apart, while at the same time they have been very compliant with the empire and financial industrial complex, establishing their connections with capitalism, and Western enterprises keep flooding in there, like businesses like McDonald's and you name it. Although lately, like with the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, there has like Kazakhstan began expressing their basically they were discontent with the Russia's engagement. So like again, I'm sorry, to summarize, if these places are ran by elites that kind of look out for their interests, turning to Putin and turning to the US, allowing them to put their bases there, how do you think things can potentially play out if we expect things to pick up in sense of World War III, and yeah, what can happen?
Yeah, okay, so that's a great point. And I don't know that much about Central Asia, but you're absolutely right in that there are three major powers vying for influence in Central Asia, right? You've got China with its Belt and Road Initiative. You've got Russia, which has military bases throughout the region. You also have the United States, which also has military bases throughout the region. And you're absolutely right in that, you know, these countries, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, all of them, they want to maintain neutrality. You know, they want to basically navigate great power rivalry and try to benefit as much as possible from this rivalry. The problem, though, is that eventually these great powers will want them to pick a side. And we can expect over the next 10 years a lot of coups d'etats, a lot of political revolutions, color revolutions, a lot of political assassinations within Central Asia as China, Russia, and the United States attempt to control the region for their own benefit. The reality is like this war in Iran cannot be won. And so what's going to happen is this conflict is going to expand outwards. So a country to watch very closely would be Azerbaijan, right? Because Azerbaijan is very close to both Israel and the United States. And as this war progresses, what Russia is going to do is reinforce Tehran through the Caspian Sea. And so what the United States wants to do is create as much conflict in that region as possible. Kazakhstan is also very important. Central Asia is very important because how China will reinforce Tehran is through railway system, right? So transport goods from China across Central Asia to Tehran. And so the Americans will want to disrupt this. So it was a great game again. And you'll have the United States trying to create as much conflict and chaos in Central Asia as possible in order to blockade, to isolate Iran. Okay, so that's what I think is going to happen. Okay, thank you. Oz, are you here?
Sorry, I already asked my question.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Farhan?
Hello. So my question is, well, so you say that this ground division would be a dumpster fire, and I completely agree with you. But for the sake of a hypothetical, what if everything went right for the Americans? That the Kurds do fight, that that Azerbaijan gets involved, and maybe even the UK, and there are uprisings, and the IRGC is just fighting on every side.
Yep.
Would that be a turning point for the American empire, or would that just sort of delay the collapse?
Yeah, that would delay the collapse, because next play would be this. Let's just assume, hypothetically, everything goes perfectly well for the Americans in Iran. Then what would happen is this: North Korea takes the stage. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so I'm Vladimir Putin, and I'm like, I can't afford for the United States to take over Iran, because that completely screws me over, right? Now the United States can completely focus on the war in Ukraine, and my entire southern flank is open up. Central Asia now goes to America, right? The war is over. So what do? I open up a new front, which is North Korea, and I force the United States to deal with North Korea, right? And North Korea has nuclear weapons, and it has artillery that can threaten Seoul. It can lobby missiles into Japan. So the United States has absolutely no choice but to deal with South Korea now, but to deal with North Korea now, right? So that's what would happen. I think this will happen naturally anyway. But if it's clear that this ground invasion is going too well, then North Korea takes the stage.
Gotcha. So I was you sort of answered, but you don't think that Russia would then pull out of Ukraine, that they would take a step back, that they would just double down?
No way. What would happen is if Russia were to pull out of Ukraine, then Russia would be dead in 20 years' time, because then what would happen is a complete embargo on Russia. Now, a really important factor that people don't appreciate is China is not signing the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline deal. Okay? So the idea is if China were to sign the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline deal, Russia could supply China with all the energy needs that China has. And but this would be bad for China longer term, because it makes China completely dependent on Russia, right? Basically, Russia would have infinite financing from China, and then China would have infinite financing from infinite energy from Russia. But this would tie the destinies of these two countries together. And the fact that China is not signing this deal means that basically Russia is alone on the world stage. There's an alliance between China and Russia. It's all theater. It's not really taking place. And so Russia, if it were to retreat from Ukraine, if Iran were to fall, Russia would be dead in 20 years' time. There'll be no hope for Russia. It'll be completely isolated in the world. So it cannot afford for Iran to fall. Iran is the ultimate battle, the final battle for Russia. Okay, and that's why North Korea will have to take the stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. So guys, I'm really tired. I know there are more questions, but unfortunately, I'm exhausted, and we'll continue this. Okay. So as this war continues in the Middle East, if there's a ground invasion, there'll definitely be an emergency live stream. Okay. So let's we'll do one more question. Okay. So Roma, can you ask your question, please? And this will be the last question. So I apologize to Dia and HH, but I can't get to you. I'm so exhausted from today. Okay, so Roma, ask your question, and that'll be it.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to give you one more follow-up, I guess. So for some time I had this, feedback, I guess. So as a Russian, I found that a certain bias or romanticizing, like in your attitude towards, Russian people, Russian leaders, which I wanted to point out for your awareness. Two small examples, right? So in a video about Russia, you mentioned that Russians became happier because of the war. So my personal opinion, nobody's happy seeing like their relatives, sons, husbands killed for nothing. And the war already had visible implications for Russian people that are impossible to ignore for them. And second one, regarding Russian leader, right? So you mentioned that Russian president is a strategic genius, but these days, what we can witness is Russia in decline, and economic crisis ravaging, and the war ravages on the Russian territory. So, and which once was perceived as one of the strongest militaries in the world is now humiliated, basically. So my impression from observing Russian reality firsthand for decades is that Russian leader never had any plan or vision other than like stealing as much money as possible and spending it on luxury, which would make him similar to many world leaders, really. And the war which is really war with Ukraine is the only, I think, unfortunate exception to absence of his vision, I would say.
Okay, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate that perspective. Again, I've never been to Russia. I don't know that many Russians, and I agree with a lot of things you say. I think like the war is not going well for Russia, and these attacks on Russian oil refineries, it's going to cause a lot of damage to the Russian economy. And I can appreciate that there are a lot of Russians who are unhappy about this war. But I will still say that I think that Putin is a genius. He does know what he's doing. Of all the world leaders that I've seen, I think that only Putin seems to know what he's doing. I'm able to actually predict what he does because he's very strategic. He's very long-term thinking. So I think that North Korea will come into play soon. Because that, if I'm Putin, that's the next logical step to extend the war to East Asia, which will then put more pressure on the American military. I will also say, and you and I will have to disagree, is I do think Putin does love his country. I think Putin loves his country, and I think Putin loves his people. The way he does it is something that you and I may disagree with, but I think he's genuine in his love for Russia. Okay, so I will leave it there, guys. So thanks so much for today. It was a lot of fun. And if there's another breaking news, then I'll do another live stream. Okay, so thanks so much, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.